Well, he's one of only 3 players to take 300 Test wickets and score over 4,000 Test runs. It's a pleasure this morning to have Daniel Vettori in the zone. Got a willing helper, and who better to talk spin as well than Shane Warne. We'll have Nasser Hussain along in due course. Dan, did you want to be an all black or a black cap when you were younger?
No, always a black cap. I was always Sir Richard Hadlee. Everyone watched him, so it was easy to aspire to him. I didn't think I could make it in rugby.
Did you start as a spinner?
No, I started as medium pacer. I think once again, Sir Richard Hadlee, green wickets back home. It was just a little bit easier being a medium pacer. I think I changed when I was about 15. I bowled about the same pace, bowling medium pace or spin, so it didn't make too much difference.
But it's a brave thing to want to be a spinner out in New Zealand, as you say, because the pitches over there were green. You've got some very odd-shaped grounds, very short boundaries.
I think John Bracewell was sort of the first guy that I really watched who I could see him compete, and then watching this man, so you could see how spinners could, I suppose, make a name for themselves in the game by still being aggressive, still being attacking, and they probably led the way in a lot of ways.
Yeah, what were the keys for you when you first started? You said you made the change from seamers, you wanted to be Richard Hadlee, then to spin. What were the keys for you? How did you get taught? You said Bracewell. Was he the main sort of influence?
I didn't get taught to him until I was a little bit later on. I suppose it was a natural thing for me. I had a natural affinity once I started trying to bowl spin. The only problem for me is I've got small hands, so when I first started, I had to actually hold the ball with 3 fingers, and that probably set up the way I tried to hold it. And then once my fingers got a little bit bigger, I could get it in there. And then my big thing was I like to jam it in as hard as I could.
So it was pressure, and you used to have it really tight?
I used to have it really tight because I like the feel on the ball. I felt like if I could have that grip on there, I'd even sort of put a little bit of lacquer on it, get right in there and hold it tight. And as I released, it loosened up as I went along, but the top of my mark, I wanted it tight in there just to get a feel for the ball more than anything.
So just plop it in your hand. What was the grip you ended up with for your orthodox delivery?
So it was like that from orthodox delivery. I think when you see slow-mos, you see my thumb involved a lot, but it was just there.
Resting.
Never really played a part in the delivery at all. And as I'd release, it would be that first forefinger would do the majority of the work. And when I was bowling well, you could see my forefinger sort of travel over the top of the ball, and that's when you knew things were going well.
Did you ever try looser? Or you always never changed from that when you first started?
No, I did. I spoke to Hubbajan about this. He said he had a really loose grip, so he just held it there. But I think it's because, once again, with small hands, I liked it tight in there, so I got a feel. But occasionally, from time to time, it was a little bit looser. I don't think it wasn't detrimental to what I was trying to do. It was just a natural feel thing for me to get it in tight and jam it in.
I think for kids out there, try both. Because, you know, it would be hard. I had a loose grip myself because I always felt that relaxed me. So I'd put the ball in my hand like that and I'd feel nice and relaxed. I felt if I did it really tight, like you're saying, that I'd be so tense when I got there I could hardly get it out. So I think for kids out there, just try both, and whatever works for you is the right way.
Just going to analyse that sort of orthodox delivery. You mentioned that finger doing the donkey work, providing the power. Is it about trying to keep that finger on the ball as long as possible? You mentioned that to me.
That's exactly it. I think the thing is that there's so many parts to allow you to keep that finger on the ball as long as possible. And I think for me, a lot of the time it was about my delivery stride. So if my delivery stride was really long and I released, then I'd release from back there and I could never actually get the top spin. But when I was short delivery stride, I was up tall and then I could release the ball late. Looking at Graham Swan, if you saw Graham Swan from side on, he sort of released that far in front, and that meant that the time your hand spends on the ball is, the difference is from here to there. So you actually get the opportunity to put more revolutions on it. So a short delivery stride allowed me to get taller into that good position, taller, and then you can use your natural your variations from there, whether you're undercutting it, going to the top. From here, you've basically only got the undercutter in your repertoire, and that can be useful on certain wickets. But from that position there, it allowed you to do so many different things.
On that, the action, everyone talks about fast bowlers having a strong base and getting that position. It's very important that spin bowlers have exactly the same. You need to make sure that you have that base to allow you to make sure you can be there, bowl over your front leg, get your arm in the right position, follow through, all the things that fast bowlers do. And just because we come off a couple of steps, step and fetch at spinners, it still is a lot of work through your hips and everything to move to get into those positions, as Dan is talking about. And if you don't, and you are in those awkward positions, you can't actually do that. It's not all about just coming out of your hand right. It's a lot of moving parts.
First-class victim, N. Hussain. First Test victim, N. Hussain. We're doing this just so we can have a bit of fun. But also to look at your approach to the crease. How did that change? How did that evolve? Because great hair.
Jealous of the hair.
But look at the angle you're coming at to go. How did that change and why?
So it changed between my first and second Test, funnily enough. So pretty much the first time you really see yourself on TV, and there was a lot of comments around.
Go back.
So I found it was just copied every other left arm spinner, threw it around, and then after that first test, people spoke to me about if you're going in that direction, all your momentum is heading that way. So it's almost like you get to that point there, and you've got to come all the way back to there. And that can be fine at times because you can actually get yourself in a really strong position and you can get over. But I think it allows you to be as consistent. So when I started coming straight, all my momentum was going there. So I actually had a lot more behind the ball rather than pushing in that direction. And so that allowed me to get in that position that I'm talking about before, whereas I can get over the top, whereas here, it's a long way round to get there. So I just found I could be a lot more consistent when everything was going towards the target.
Well, let's just show a couple of clips of you, sort of the later back end of your career, so to speak. A shorter run-up as well. Is that a shorter delivery stride?
Everything was geared towards getting that short delivery stride because I found that put me in my best position. So lots of one-day cricket, lots of fast bowling, lengthened out my delivery stride, and therefore I was undercutting it a bit or bowling from behind the perpendicular as opposed to being there over the top. So it all came back to delivery stride, but there's a lot of factors along the way. I found if my first step in my run-up was too long, then I'd get boundy, and then I could never shorten that last delivery stride out. So it was very important for me to be first step. I'll go back here.
Yep.
My first step was always almost in front of myself, so it didn't allow me to get like that because as soon as I started doing that, I could never shorten that. So I wanted to be incremental increases in my delivery, in my steps, so then when I got there, I could be strong position, short delivery stride.
One of the keys for what Dan's talking about, it's all about alignment, simplifying everything, keeping it simple, but alignment allows you to go straight at the target. The target is the batsman and the stump. So all those things, it's okay, but it does put a lot of pressure and more things can go wrong. The alignment straight at the target, the batsman, makes you more consistent. And if you're not sure, I had one day where I couldn't remember what foot I started off. It was the middle of a test match in Adelaide, and I sort of started going, what do I do? And it was on the break, and I think it was Bob Simpson said, mate, turn around. And I said, what? So I turned around like that and he pushed me and my foot went forward, so he said, you start off your left foot. I said, OK, so I went after the break. I said, I did too, I'd start off my left foot. So it's important, that stuff.
I went through a test, I couldn't remember if my run-up was 8 or 9 steps.
What are you spinners like?
Sure it's 8.
Come to the end of your run-up, because I want you to bowl just a couple. We've got Brooke down here. Thanks for joining us, Brooke. Brooke's a second-team keeper from Lancs. He's got a game of club cricket later on. I'm just going to test your wrist position. We've got the red and white ball. Did you use these, though?
All the time. I really liked it as a visual cue for myself to get back to that point of... I used to try and force myself to bowl top spinners because, once again, delivery stride, you can't bowl a top spinner from that position, but you can bowl one from there. So the red and white allowed me to do that a lot.
Let's see the release then.
I'll try and get it down there. Almost.
Bit short, but in terms of how the scene came out, what do you reckon?
Probably a little scrambled, but I think this gives you those cues that you really want. And I think the other thing about getting all that alignment right that Warne's talking about is that the visual impact it has on a batter, where if you're out wide out here, then the batsman's eye goes straight to your arm out there, and so the angle's consistent. Whereas if you're here, and it drifts, then you take the batsman's eye line, you change the eye line. I think the wider you are, the harder it is to change the batsman's eye line. So that alignment, straight on, everything going towards the target is probably one of the most important things for a young spin bowler.
You mentioned drift. You always talk about you've got to put revs on the ball to drift it. We saw Maharaj yesterday with a howling breeze going across. Was he getting any sort of help from the breeze, or is that all about the revs he puts on the ball?
I'm sure he got a little bit, but it is the revs on the ball. And he's a guy I really enjoy watching, and I think he does what we're talking about really well, that he gets over the ball, and that allows him to get revs and then gets drift. I think there was a dismissal against Bairstow where it looked like it turned a long way, but it was more the drift that set it up. You see Bairstow's eye line change, and then he's playing out there. It spins. It's a beautiful ball, but the drift set up that dismissal.
And there's a difference, what Dan's talking about. The reason you get that spin and drift is when you see the ball and the batsman going like this, and late movement when the ball dips in like that. When the wind's coming and people talk about, oh, it's drifting in, that's just angle from where you've dropped the ball, and the ball will just go like this. Where you upset the batsman and you deceive the batsman in their length is all about, like Dan said, how many revs you can get on the ball. You get enough revs on the ball, yes, the wind might push the ball a little bit like that, but it's that last little bit where you deceive the batsman. the batsman thinks it's going to be there for the shot, but it suddenly goes in and ducks in and dips, and that's when you get guys playing across the line. That's when you get guys hitting caught and bowled, those types of things. And it's the dip and the curve and that you get is all on the revs you get. It's got nothing to do with the wind. The wind just helps.
Right.
But that late dip in, that late curve is all about how many revs you can get on it, as Dan was talking about, or a leg spinner, or Maharaj, as we saw yesterday when he got his groove going, he had revs on the ball.
So that's the grip for the orthodox, and that's how you want to see it come out. What was your first variation that you learned?
Always the arm ball. So, I mean, once again...
How would you grip the arm ball?
So,
how would that differ from your normal?
So when I was young, it would be wait till the batsman wasn't looking, and I'd just go like that. And run in, and then when a few people told me they were picking up on it, I started with the same grip. So I started like that, and then in my gather, I shifted into that position there. So if I can do it slowly, gathered here, and then pushed it there, and then just release it like a seamer almost. And so I tried to have two variations of that, where it was almost the undercutter, which is the leg spinner's version of a slider, where you've got a little bit on it, it may drift, it may do something at the other end, and then just almost, it's a straight seamer, the arm ball really, just one finger behind and release it out that way.
Can you show us that?
I'll try.
Boom.
Nice.
Right, okay. And the feel is still, it's coming off, the feel is all about that finger,
it's
is
that
it?
finger. So when it swings, it can be a devastating ball, because it should come out exactly the same, that your arm speed's the same, everything's the same. All you've done is released from that position as opposed to there. So all you're doing is subtly changing the angle of your wrist.
When we first come across Dan, I think it was around 98 in Australia, the one thing that I think impressed all of us when Dan was young was his change of pace.
Yep.
And when he's showing you here his arm balls and things like that, but he was very clever too. So I was going to say, for you, when you first started, so I just want to take some wickets and bowl well, I don't want to bowl any bad balls. When did you sort of change to say, well, what am I bowling? When am I bowling it? Why am I bowling it? When did you start
Keep going.
When did you start to learn those sort of things?
First time I got hit for 6.
At Eden Park on the small boundaries?
I think it is a lot. You see how almost dismissive batsmen are of spin at a young age, and it's the slog. So you get to learn about their tells, their cues, when they're going to come at you, and how you can, I suppose, deal with that at any time. And so I think it's just learning off the batsman you're coming against. And I used to like bowling to really aggressive players in the nets, just to get a feel for where I was at. So if I knew I was beating them, or I was getting a read on their cues, then I could take that into the game. And I always like to match that up with, say, someone I was playing against in the next game.
Yeah, a better plan, isn't it? It's having a plan.
Can I show you something? Bowling at Gale, then. Talk about players coming at.
Thanks very much.
Where is it? Yeah, thanks so much. So this is obviously one-day cricket, and we'll come on to that. But in terms of changing your pace, now if you watch this and the speeds of this, I mean, ground dimensions are one thing. 100 kilometres an hour, pushing it through. Is that because of the player, the ground, and then we see the one with Sarwan, and it goes...
Well, I think that's
there we go, up.
Purely a match-up. You think the aggressiveness of Gale, the ball coming back into him, probably the state of the game. There's so many factors that go into it that my role at that time is just to get him off strike, and I thought the best way to do that was to be quick. Right. And then when Sarwan came into face, I felt more comfortable. I knew the ball's going away from him, and I got a read probably that he was going to try and be aggressive, and then that ability to slow it up.
And also, you talk about the pitch, there's a lot of things that go into it. Dan's also got to weigh up the pitch.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to weigh up? Does it take you an over or so to weigh up what the right pace for your stock ball and things like that is?
I think so. I think, the first over is always a challenge. I mean, you're almost just trying to get through it. So I used to bowl quick through my first over, spread the field a little bit just so I could have a comfort level, and then the second over I'd like to bring in my variation. So the first over was a real feel thing, finding out about the wicket, finding out about the aggressive, the intent of the batsman as well. You could read that pretty early on. So I like to say to spinners, get yourself in the game. Stay on. Get selected. Stay in the game. If you bowl that when you're not quite ready and it goes for 6, most captains will take you off. If your first 3 overs go for 20, you're not going to get that opportunity. But if your first 3 overs go for 8 or 9, then then you start to feel good about yourself, and then you can actually bring in your variations and your control.
Just just on that though, what happens when you play under a captain that doesn't really captain that well and you get the token last over before lunch? You still just try and stay on, or do you try a few different things?
Well, I think that's sort of plagued New Zealand spinners, because the wickets are suited to seam bowlers. So how many overs to the new ball? 10?
Yeah.
There you go, mate. Get us 3 poles. And I think that sentiment's changing a lot, but I think it is really difficult for a young spinner to say, here's my one opportunity, I've got to make a mark. But I'd still prefer them to stay in the game.
Stay in the game.
Stay in the game, and the more balls you bowl, the more opportunities you get.
Just want to investigate the change of pace. So that over that we were talking about in the one-day game, 77, 100, 101, 83, 70, so all that's what I always hear about, people admiring your bowling. So I'm going to take you back to a battle you had with Kevin Peterson. Now, you know that Kev's going to try and come at you. But the subtle variations again, what are you thinking when you see a batsman like that, and how are you trying to toy with him almost?
So with someone like Kevin, you know that he's obviously going to be aggressive. So I'm trying to read him as late as possible. And I think the stuff we talked about with technique before, where if I'm over the top and bowling from there, I actually get a longer read on the batsman. If I'm back there, then I'm releasing a little bit earlier. I'm not quite sure what he's trying to do. So in this situation, I'm trying to be strong as I can there, read him the whole time, and then make those really late changes. So it's amazing how much your technique allows you to bring in your skill and your intuition as well, because you've got a sort of read on him, but you've still got to bowl the ball that stops him from doing what he wants to do, and being as late as possible on what I was trying to do, or what length I was trying to bowl. I might have had the ball in mind already, but the length I could change dictating on what he was going to do.
The other thing is the situation of the game. They're 34 for 3 there, so it's in Dan's favour, so he can tease him a little bit more. You know, if it's KP's on and Dan comes in and it's 3 for 180, 200, suddenly it's a different kettle of fish too.
Right, I'm going to bring Nasser in. Where are you, Nas? That change of pace, why does that challenge the batsman? Let's flip it down to the other end.
Well, with Dan, the change of pace came with no discernible change in action. It's like a quicker bowler. They bowled a slower ball and they'd slow their arm speed down. Blatantly obvious it's a slower ball. Dan used to run in and bowl with exactly the same arm speed, and it would either come up beautifully quick and drift in, or from nowhere, it would go up and deceive you. He's a classic example of what they say, excuse me, of a spinner getting you out, deceiving you before the ball's pitched. Great spinners get you out in the air. And with all respect to Daniel Vettori, he didn't have the tricks of the trade of a Shane Warne, didn't have the flipper, didn't have the front honour, the Zuta, didn't have a Murali Dusra, etc. He had an arm ball and a nice flighted delivery. And also, I've always felt when I was facing with Daniel Vettori, you see some of the actions there, and he just mentioned it, he would get in that position and he would be looking at you. At that millisecond, he seemed to be ahead of the game, whether he knew you were coming, staying back. I think when we first played against him in Hamilton, his first class wicket, I think he was a very bright cricketer then.
Yeah.
I think playing under someone like Stephen Fleming, etc., made him even brighter. I know what Shane says about the breezes in New Zealand, etc., and it's revs on the ball, but he used those breezes, those cross breezes in New Zealand. On grounds that are odd-shaped, he wouldn't be afraid saying, go on, if you want to hit me out of the ground at Auckland, you can. It's a little chip over mid-wicket, but I will back myself. He seemed to have a gut feel as to what the batsman was trying.
Clever.
Would you mind trying to hit Nasser on the knee? I'm sorry, would you mind bowling to Nas?
I've just bigged you up there, Dan, by the way.
So starting at Nas...
You got my tail 20 years later.
so starting at Nas, it'd be like an orthodox, and then you're sort of assessing how he's going to play and how the pitch is going to go.
If he's just come to the crease, then I'd have...
Pretend you don't know who he is, type thing.
I'll be trying to rip his pad off the first ball.
Bit short.
Jeez, Nas loved that. Look at him, didn't he? Right. He's trying not to smile too. Look at him.
That'll do. That'll do.
He actually held the pose a little bit there too, didn't he?
What line do you reckon you
I want to attack the stumps. I want to attack the stumps. See what happens from there.
Ooh.
Oh, yes.
Now, and then if you bowled, say, a variation, like the arm ball, at which point would you... I mean, I know you've got a red and white ball here, but at which point can you see that variation happening?
Not at all. You know that bit he just told you about changing it in his action? I have learnt that for the first time here today. I'm being honest, that's the great thing about these masterclasses and listening to these guys. And Shane Warne did one at Old Trafford or Durham all those years ago. Some of the stuff you hear now, I think, crikey, I wish I'd learnt that 30 years ago. But you can't tell. When he's changing it here, you can't tell, because that finger stuff, for his spinner, he has that finger there. For the arm ball, he has that spinner there. So you only really pick it in this last third if there's something different going on.
Tell it with your minces.
Well, that's the reason for all the young batsmen out there is also to really watch the hand. Sometimes but coaches will say, watch the ball, watch the ball. You've got to focus in on the hand. If you can always read what a spinner's doing by their hand because they give it away for you. But you might pick it up late, but if you're just watching an area, not really watching the hand and the ball, then you will pick it up super late.
Dan,
Brendan McCallum was telling me... Oh,
just bowl me an arm ball, just to...
Oi.
Good shape.
Sorry, Dan, what were you going to say there?
I was saying that Brendan McCallum was telling me recently that he started watching the spinner's hand from top
Back
of the mark.
there, yeah.
So he's watching from here.
If they change it,
the
do anything different.
the whole way. Whereas I think most of the time you're taught, watch the
release,
see what's happening, the release. But if you can follow it the whole way, then it obviously means you're centred in on what's happening. But also you can see those subtle changes a lot earlier than getting them there at the last minute.
Exactly, because I used to, when I came into here, when I used to bowl my flipper, I'd come into here and my leg break, I used to just change it just there because I'd actually get into a better position so I could actually come up and then let it come out like that rather than normally like this. So it's a lot easier for me. So you're watching the hand the whole way. Little tricks like that where you just do Risco's things. Even the way they put the ball in the hand, some spinners are different for different deliveries.
I want to talk to you about another variation which you came up with for one-day cricket. The scrambled seam. Now, where have I got it? Here we go. Why was this an important delivery that you developed in the latter stage of your career, and what did it do?
I think there's two parts to it. It's the prevalence of spinners bowling earlier, so might open the bowling, might bowl in the first 10, and also two balls, 25 overs each. The ball stayed newer longer, so to be able to hold the ball cross seam and then bowl exactly the same ball, and when it hit, it gathered speed a lot of the time, particularly with the new ball. And you see a ball like that, it's still got the same shape, everything. So a batsman sets up to play a general ball that'll hit the wicket and hold a little bit. Though with the scrambled seam, it gathered speed, and it allowed that if you couldn't get your bat there in time, that was obviously going to hit your pad. And so that generating speed off the ground through a cross seamer was one of the best things I think happened to me.
So just show us that grip and how it varies from your normal one.
So normal one would be like that. And once again, I don't think batsmen are watching that hard most of the time. So to go there, you don't need to do anything different apart from hold the seam that way straight across it. And so your release is you're flicking the ball off the seam there as opposed to going down the seam. But nothing else should change. Everything should stay the same. Incredibly difficult to pick up with a new ball, even an old ball.
When it's not red and white.
When it's not red and white, and you get the benefits there.
What did you like about... Sorry, go on, Naz.
Did you change throughout your career? Because my gut feels when you first started, you used to deceive batsmen on the outside edge, big spinner of the ball. As you progressed, you were much more sort of line bowler at the batsman, trying to deceive him on the inside edge. Was that because of the back or one-day cricket? What changed?
I don't think so. I think it was probably role. It was one-day cricket. It was playing a lot of that. So you had different roles going from game to game. In New Zealand, we played on a lot of drop-in wickets, so I became not a defensive bowler, but I could do a role in the first innings, and so therefore it allowed seamers to bowl and bowl and bowl. So I think it subtly evolved over time. It wasn't a conscious decision to say, right now I'm going to do this as opposed to that. It was just, I think it was just a matter of the timing of when I was bowling, what I was doing.
What did you love about spin bowling the most? What gave you the biggest buzz when you're bowling spin?
Two things. I think that deception in the air, so the slow one, to see someone come down and miss it, and then ripping someone's front pad off.
What about hitting people in the head? I mean, this is this is pre-dropping pitches. This is pre-dropping pitches. This is why you wanted to be a spinner. I mean, when did you go over the wicket and into the rough like that?
So, I mean, this was a bit of an anomaly to have a wicket in New Zealand like this. This is my second Test match.
What's this, though?
That's what you call a leaning jowler.
So to have that, I mean, this is Test cricket. This is awesome. If I'm going to play on wickets like this all the time, but they changed a lot. But that's a lot of fun doing that.
Absolutely. Could you just bowl one? That scrambled seam you were talking about. You're going to face another one? Yeah, there you go.
But that's a natural variation. Also, Dan's not exactly sure what that's going to do. And like you said before, it could hit and gather pace and skid. So Nasser's sitting there, he's changed the seam, what's going on there, a bit different. Suddenly it skids off, so he thinks every time he does that, it's going to go straight on and skid. The next time it might just grip and turn a bit, so then he goes, hang on a minute, what do you do different there? So that's that natural variation.
Do you know why? I reckon you would have played a bit on DRS or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why these two nowadays would get so many more wickets, because there I'm lining them up thinking, is it going to spin, is it not?
Yeah.
Him with that ball out the front of the hand. In the old days, you could go like that, bat and pad. These two nowadays playing would get so many more wickets if that's possible.
Final one, because you're very heavily involved in T20 and the franchise and coaching. A young kid bowling spin now is not going to have the time like you both did to groove your action in first-class cricket or test match cricket. They've got a bowl at a bloke that's trying to hit them into the next paddock. How do you teach them? What do you say to kids in the modern era?
Well, I think there's obviously two parts to it. There's about getting the job done on the day. So, T20 game, you might bowl to a left-hander who's teeing you off. You've got to get the job done. So you might have to bowl a Yorker, you might have to be defensive. I think it's in between games. You're going back to your focal points around your technique, your short delivery stride, just bowling top spinners, so that you're evolving both games at the same time. Because you want to be able to switch between defence and attack. Because I think the T20 cricket, you get chances to attack. You get 2 or 3 balls a game, so you still want to have that ability. So I suppose it's just the training more than anything. Let's train you being a classical spinner. Let's train you being a defensive bowler, and then your skill is when you're going to do it, when you're going to take the time.
And the last thing to add to that is that, remember, if you're a fast bowler, bowl fast. If you're a swing bowler, swing the ball. If you're a spin bowler, spin it as far as you possibly can. Just spin it. If it drops short, it's okay, because someone like Nasser or someone might go back and cut it and you get caught at point. They might try and pull you and it bounces a bit more, you get caught at mid-wicket. So if you're a spin bowler, you're not a slow bowler, you're a spin bowler, so spin the ball.
Dan, thank you for coming
well
in.
done,
It's been
Dan.
a pleasure to listen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well done,
Thanks,
pal.
Warne. Cheers, mate. Thanks, Ness.